So today we're here with Dr. Scott LePor from Gordon Hospital Internal and Family Medicine. We're thrilled that you've taken time out of your schedule to be with us.
And thank you for asking me.
Absolutely. It's been a joy to get to know you over the past couple of years, and you're a person of passion, a person of faith. But you have a passion for relationships, and specifically trust-based interpersonal relationships. Did I say that right?
Yes.
And so I'm really drawn to that concept. And so we were talking a couple months ago, and you recommended a book called The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, this book right here. And you didn't know it at the time. I was reading Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. So they're brothers, great authors, and I was about halfway through this book when you recommended this one. I ordered this one, and so I finished this. I haven't finished that one yet, but I was just pulled right into this. It's excellent.
Yes.
Why did you find this book so helpful, and why did it speak to you?
So, so who recommended that book to me was a gentleman named Jared Thurman. And this guy's been a hotbed of just wonderful resources. So I kind of let him screen the books, and then he gives me the ones that are good. So he had recommended that to me, and I do a lot of work, volunteer in the foster care system, and as you were saying, it's based upon what we call trust-based relational intervention. And so it's all about building trust-based relationships, connecting with people, and then helping them change their lives. So also we've kind of carried that over into the healthcare system. So here at Gordon Hospital, Adventist Health Systems, that's a part of their mission, is to connect with the patients, connect with staff, and empower their lives to be the best that it can be, so that we can make that whole healthcare experience wonderful.
Right.
So in saying all of that, so that book became a part of integrating practicality and how to make that happen. What does that look like? So we all know that we want to make people's lives better. We want their experience to be good. But then again, we may not know exactly how to do that. And so this book actually brings about scientific studies and good interpretation of data, and these guys bring it together in a book that's just chock full of, I mean, it's really endless of what's in there. It's crazy. So they talk about principles that they have, 4 principles of, and an acronym you can use is EPIC. They chose not to use that in the book, but they presented it. Now, of course, it sticks in your brain because they said it. And then it works. So it's elevation, pride, insight, and connection. And moments that have even just parts of that, maybe it's just elevation, or it's elevation and insight, or just insight, or it may have all 4. But so moments that have those principles, the brain remembers and actually can help change who we are. So it's just amazing what that book talks about.
One of the things that you mentioned to me when you were introducing the book was that, when we look back on an experience, that any of us go through various experiences throughout the day, we look back on an experience, we typically remember a peak of that experience, and then we remember the ending. So sometimes if you look at the whole scope of an experience, there may be some low points, there may be some medium points, there may be some high points, but the scientific research indicates we remember the peak and the ending, and not all the other mundane points of the experience in between. And so as individuals, as husbands, as fathers, or as business people, I mean, we can see that and come up with opportunities to create these intentional peaks for people, to where they look back on interactions with us in a very positive way.
Yes. So I found that to be amazing as well. And they use that example of Walt Disney World, of the family that's there. They rate their experience of that day at 6.5, and then they waited a couple of months or several weeks. They ask them again how it was, and they say it was a 9. So, which is amazing, and it's a powerful tool. So we can use that data, and it's not to negate the whole experience, but to find out what are peaks, how is that ending going to be, and let's nurture that as much as possible. And if we don't see a peak, then create a peak.
Right.
And then use those principles of elevation, pride, insight, connection as ways that we could see what would fit best in that situation and create it for that person so that they can experience it and remember in a positive way, and it also helps change them.
So one of the things that I've noticed since reading this book is it's just really made me aware of stuff that's happening around me that, that just happens on a daily basis or sometimes is very intentional. One example is one of my colleagues who work on my staff here in the marketing department. We have a staff meeting every Monday afternoon, and he emailed us first thing on Monday, and he said, I was driving to work today and had this idea. Why don't we all take a few minutes to write something nice, something that we admire about each one of our colleagues, and then we'll print them out, cut them up, put them in a fishbowl, and during staff meeting, we'll pull them out and read about each other. And I thought, oh, that's a cute idea. Well, yeah,
Yes.
let's do that. And so we go into staff meeting, and staff meeting normally starts with small talk and then prayer, and then we jump right to the agenda. Well, this time we had prayer, and then we jumped right to that fishbowl and started reading about each other. And every now and then we might pull out one about ourselves, and that was awkward. But I will never forget that 30 minutes that we spent building each other up and what that did for me as an individual, but then also for our team. And in the book, they talk about the concept of breaking script. And our script is always to go in, make small talk, have prayer, get to the agenda. This time we broke script. And I've talked to various members on our team, and we all have those papers, those pieces of paper. I think I have mine. Yeah, my papers are right here of everything that people wrote about me. And if I'm having a bad day, I can go and pull one of those and read it. What a difference that made.
That's awesome. And so that's occurred to me too. So in part of the research that I'm involved with, it talks about the same science that's in there, and it's why we remember what we remember from our childhood. And typically it's going to be an elevation, either good or bad. Mm-hmm. So for me, I started to think back about the things I remember about my childhood. And so now knowing that, I'm like, why do I remember that? It isn't just a random memory that's there. Well, it's there for a reason. So something impacted me, either good or bad. So as I started to go back through my life, I could say, wow, what did I like about that? And I started to see what the book talks about. So it made sense, but either it was an elevation, or I achieved something and somebody was amplifying my joy in that achievement, or I came to an insight that changed my life, or there was deep connection. So in that, is how it applies to what I do as a physician and a patient comes in, and how this kind of connected with me and made sense of it is in my day, unfortunately, I'm scheduled to the max. There's patients that need to get in, and we're booked back to back to back, usually 15 minutes apart. And in that 15 minutes, I have to make sense of your labs, where you were last time, what are you here for? Do we need to make adjustments? What are we going to do in the future? Talk about it,
Yeah.
and it's almost impossible. So in that, I can lose sight of who you are and what you're here for. And so I can start to cut you out of the picture and just move on and not really want to hear what you have to say. So then I can actually go in the opposite direction, and then I become mundane. I become something you don't desire or ever remember. So one thing that stuck out to me, this was years ago, but I came into a room and I started to get out of the pattern of connecting with a patient because I could be more productive and it was quicker. And she said to me, did you not notice how much weight I lost? She just looked defeated. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, well, look at my weight. I thought you would know. And I looked, and she had lost 30 pounds or whatever since I saw her last. And I was like, good job. But she felt defeated because she, in her mind, had been working hard for 4 months or 6 months. And she was changing her life. She put a lot of time into this. So in her mind, she's thinking, Dr. LePor is going to see this. He's going to be so happy with me. And so her reward that she had set up kind of was deflated.
Yeah.
And that really impacted me. And now that I understand through the book and putting some science together, I really pay attention to that. So before I even go into the room, have they lost weight? Are their labs better than they were? Because when we get together, that's what we talk about. What can we do in your life, or how can I help you make your life better. And so when they set up a plan, I want to know and recognize their efforts and what they've put the time into. So if I see a big weight loss, their cholesterol's come down, I'm prepared and I walk into that room. Way to go,
Yeah.
Garrett, man. You've knocked it out. Tell me what you've been doing. And that just escalates them. It gives them a sense of pride of achievement, or that joy that they get from achieving the work. And it really nurtures that in them. And there's such a greater success rate when we make that happen. So I really just become a part of making you grow, but the growth doesn't come through me. I just become a tool that helps you become the best you can be. But I can either choose to take on that task, or I can neglect it and become more productive or faster, but then I'm really not doing my job.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
You're not extending the healing ministry of Christ when you're a
Yes.
machine or a robot.
That's right.
You know, that was a great story and a great example. One of the things, I don't know if it was from the book or maybe one of the, it might have been, I think, Dan Heath's, one of his presentations I saw on YouTube, but there's scientific evidence in that in regards to, like, if you look at one of his presentations, he showed a journey map, and basically there's all these dots along the journey, and most of them, if there's a middle line that's neutral, and then there's maybe one negative experience, and then there's 6 or 7 positive experiences, we tend, as an organization or as individuals, to focus on that negative experience and try to figure out how to turn that into a positive. But when businesses have studied that approach, they say we spend 80% of our time focusing on that negative and trying to pull it up, and only 20% of our time on the positive. But in a business, from a business standpoint, if you focus on the negatives, they're worth $1. If you focus on the positives, they're worth $9. And so, you know, your example of coming in and telling the patient what a good job they're doing and focusing on the positives, and then maybe a little bit of time, now if you make this little change, we can bring that up too, but really focusing on the positives and generate that positive reinforcement.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I thought that was amazing too. And then we are naturally, innately attracted to that negative. We want to fix the one that won't move. So to understand that, I can waste a lot of time. And you know what came to my mind is if I plant 2 seeds, and if I plant 2 apple seeds, and if one is starting to grow and produce some fruit, but one's not growing at all, I may want to water and nurture that the best I can, but if I recognize it's not growing, I'm way better off nurturing that one that can give me more fruit, that is bringing fruit. And it's unfortunate that the one didn't grow, but I would be foolish to spend all my time on something that's producing nothing than to neglect the one that is actually producing some fruit. And so that's what the science shows, that if I take the time and nurture the one that's actually giving me some fruit, I get 9-fold benefit from that. That's amazing.
It really is.
Fact to understand.
As we bring this home to the people who are watching, what's something that each one of us can do in our daily actions with people? A principle from this book.
So I think that the most profound thing for me was a key that unlocked. And actually, so I've gone through that book. I've got an audio book. I have almost an hour drive to work, so I can knock this book out repeatedly. And there's so many different facets to those principles and in their application. So I've actually listened to it several times. As it connected, so I'll go back just a little bit, but in my own life, and I have a spiritual worldview, I have a Christian spiritual worldview, and it was several years ago, but I came to a point that I saw discrepancies in how the Bible was interpreted, what are Christ's teachings, and some people said it was this, some people said it was that. And it was actually at that point in my life, and I was in my 40s, but I said, I'm throwing everything I've ever been taught out, and I'm going back to God's Word, and I'm specifically going to start with the teachings of Christ. And if it's there, I'll put it back in. And if it's not, I'm going to leave it out. And so I spent a year doing a study called The Commands of Christ. And each week took a command that Christ gave us on how to live, and I memorized that command. And then you spend the week meditating on it. You would read from the Old Testament, you'd read from the New Testament, Christ's teachings, and then the epistles. So you really took the whole Bible in its whole and you wrapped it around what Jesus taught us. So for a year I did that. And it was amazing what I learned and understood, and I actually misinterpreted a lot of what God's word was. So one of the commands, so in that, Christ says all the commands hang on two commands, to love God and to love other people. And so whatever you do in these commands, if those aren't true, you're misinterpreting what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So one command he said, which was just impactful to me, is whatever you want men do to you, do also to them. And then the most profound thing he said was, for this is the law and the prophets. And the reason that's so profound is understanding what he's talking about there. So Jesus is saying that whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the whole Bible. So what he's talking about is the law and the prophets. It comes from a Hebrew acronym, the Tanakh. And the Tanakh stands for the Torah, which is the law, the first 5 books of the Bible. This teaches us all about what God's law is about. The Nevi'im is the prophetical writings, what the prophets used to come to the courtyard of the temple and tell the king and his people, what you're doing is not what God has always wanted you to do. Please change it. It was always be righteous in everything you do, be just, be pure, and strengthen the hands of those in need. Meet the needs of the poor, bring them up. Social justice. Right. This is what God's about. This is what the prophets kept saying. And then the Ketuvim is all the other writings, Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, historical writings, kind of like that catch-all. So Jesus is saying this, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them. For this is what the Bible has always been about. This is what God's law is about. This is what the prophets kept telling you to do. And as I understood that in this book, this is exactly what all of us want for ourselves. Right. So the elevation, bring into people's life that moment of joy, that moment of excitement, that moment of being valued. I love that. Mm-hmm. So do it for other people. Pride, amplify people's joy of achievement, even if the milestone's small. Right. Amplify that and nurture it. Praise the positivity in their life and they will grow. I love that. Do it for other people. Mm-hmm. Insight, give them the truth. Let them trip over the truth. The book talks about that. Present the truth, but let them come to their own conclusion and let it change their life. Let it direct them in the right direction. And then the last one, connection. Go to where people are. Meet their needs. Live life with them. Connect with them. Let them have a trust-based relationship with you. That's what I love. Do it for other people. So that became impactful and powerful to me because I understood that everything that Christ said to be a disciple, his disciple, become like who Jesus was everything that book talked about. And that's the practical way to be a disciple of Christ. Elevate people, amplify their joy, give them insight and truth, and connect with them. So that was what became just life-changing and powerful for me. How about for you?
Oh, I mean, just little things. Yours was a big thing.
Yes.
But little things here and there that spoke to me, and I realized that this is all so easy.
Yes.
But you really have to be intentional about it. And just like your example with your patient, when you walk into the room, if you're not intentional, it's really easy to let these moments slip by. And we look at our whole day of several hundred moments, but we may only have a 15-minute interaction with somebody, or maybe even a 2-minute interaction with somebody at the drive-through or at the red light or wherever. And is there just one little thing that we could do that would change their day, that takes no effort on our part other than the act of slowing down and recognizing that opportunity?
Yes. And I think that also is so impactful for me to understand that my day should revolve around that mentality.
Yeah.
And then I have a whole different purpose.
Yep.
And I actually have joy in my life because now I become a giver of good gifts to those in need. Whereas before, my whole day can be wrapped around me. and how can I get through this day, and how can I be the most productive, how can I make the most profit today, but that cuts out everybody else. So I think that's amazing to have that mindset.
They talked about, you remember they talked about that when we extend ourselves to others, the benefit that gives us. I mean, obviously it gives benefit to
Yes.
them, but the intrinsic benefit that we experience from that is far supersedes anything that we're giving out.
And that's amazing too. The science is also showing, so as a physician, if you're an alcoholic, why they say recommend your patient to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. Why? It's because it's very successful. And then there's different reasons on why it's so successful. But if you want your patient to be super successful, have them go 20 minutes early, help them set up chairs and coffee, because we know that when someone starts to give and volunteer, they actually have much less addiction. So we're actually designed for this. And the more we live this out and we do more for other people, the more fulfilled I am.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Spiritual physics at
Yeah.
work.
Well, thank you so much for your
Yes.
time. Thank you for recommending this book to me.
Dude, my pleasure.
It was truly life-changing, and I'd recommend for anybody watching to pick it up. The Power of Moments by Chip Heath and Dan Heath. Tremendous, tremendous book.
And thank you for your friendship and for sharpening me.
Absolutely.
Yes.